They took her land. They killed her husband. They violated her daughters, and thought she would break. But what they did was awaken something ancient. Boudica, queen of the Iceni, mother, warrior, reckoning. In a time when women were expected to be silent, she became the voice of an empire's nightmare. She didn't rise for glory. She rose because the line had been crossed. And in Alpha Ordinum, that's where leadership begins, not in ambition, but in response to injustice. Boudica led the largest armed rebellion against the Roman Empire in British history. Her army swelled into the hundreds of thousands. City after city fell: Londinium, Camulodunum, Verulamium. She burned them not for power, but for principle. This wasn't rage. It was ritualized vengeance, sharpened by strategy. Modern trauma psychology speaks of two paths: collapse or conversion. Boudica converted pain into precision, suffering into asterisk signal, loss into leadership. Narrator: she did not ask permission to lead, she simply led. This is the alpha archetype in feminine form: fierce, focused, faithful to the code within, feared by those who forgot it. She was not trained in tactics, but she understood terrain. She was not born into war, but she learned to wield chaos like a weapon. And in the Alpha Ordinum ethos, she stands as the embodiment of righteous fury. They feared her not because of her numbers, but because of her conviction. True power is not force, it's clarity, backed by action. And Boudica was crystal clear. They would never touch her people again. She may have fallen in the end, but her legacy never did. Because what she carried wasn't just rebellion, it was return to instinct, to honor, to flame. And when the world forgets what it means to stand, it is women like Boudica who remind it. Welcome to Alpha Ordinum. Boudica did not begin as a warrior. She began as a mother, a queen, a wife, a woman who believed in the order of the land. But when Rome violated that order, they created something they couldn't destroy. They thought pain would silence her, but pain became her initiation. When her husband, King Prasutagus, died, the Romans ignored his will. They seized the lands, they took her daughters, they publicly humiliated her, thinking she'd be a message to other tribes. But instead, she became the message. Boudica didn't plead for peace. She ignited a war. And in Alpha Ordinum, that is one of the highest rights: to turn suffering into sovereignty. Modern neuroscience shows that trauma, when integrated, does not weaken the brain, it strengthens it. Amygdala becomes sensitized to injustice. Prefrontal circuits fire with heightened clarity. The nervous system evolves, not into fear, but into fury with direction. Boudica became this living embodiment. She didn't wait for Rome to recognize her voice. She raised an army instead, and her command was not charismatic. It was cellular. She walked like one who had nothing left to lose and everything worth fighting for. Boudica taught a generation of women what Rome tried to erase: that power isn't granted, it's reclaimed. Alpha doesn't come from title, it comes from clarity through pain. She rode into battle not with pomp, but with presence. Even Roman historians, her enemies, described her as towering, commanding, unstoppable. This was not dramatization. It was neurobiology in alignment with mission. Alpha in its rawest form. Vision beyond vengeance. Purpose beyond pain. Movement without hesitation. She burned Rome's cities not out of hate, but as ritual purification. She wasn't simply destroying. She was cleansing the dishonor they had brought to her people. In every culture, there comes a time when a woman must lead, not from permission, but from necessity. Boudica didn't ask to be a symbol. She became one. And for Alpha Ordinum, she is a reminder. That instinct doesn't need validation. It needs activation. You don't have to ride a chariot to lead, but you do need to remember what cannot be tolerated. And you need to draw your line, then hold it. This is feminine fury, not emotional chaos, but focused resistance. And that, in any age, shakes empires. Boudica is the archetype of ancestral fire. She didn't fight to prove something. She fought because it was already written. This is where pain meets purpose, where instincts become law, where lineage becomes signal. She didn't survive the war, but survival was never the goal. The signal was the goal, the story, the stand, the scar, passed down to those who would carry the fire forward. She may be gone, but the code remains, and now it's yours to carry. Welcome to Alpha Ordinum. Boudica understood something few conquerors ever do. You don't need to win to change the course of history. You only need to stand so firmly for your people that your name becomes a signal. Her war didn't last forever. Her rebellion was eventually crushed. Rome's legions outmaneuvered her, and she vanished into legend. But the question remains, if Rome won, why do we remember her name? Because fire cannot be forgotten. Because conviction carves itself into time. Because some leaders leave legacy not in what they build, but in what they burn down. Modern psychology calls it post-traumatic growth, the ability to rise from pain stronger, clearer, and more purpose-driven. Boudica was that principle made flesh. Her mind, her mission, her method, they were forged by fire. Alpha Ordinum doesn't idolize her because she fought. It honors her because she rose with nothing left, and still led with precision. This is your inheritance, not her weapons, not her army, but her conviction to protect what matters, to never let trauma steal your voice, to remember that sometimes your mission is not to endure, but to ignite. You don't need armor to be alpha, you need alignment. And when the time comes, you draw your own line, you lead your own order, and you let the fire speak. Welcome to Alpha Ordinum. You may never face an empire, but you will face injustice. You will face moments where your boundaries are crossed, where silence is no longer strength. And in those moments, Boudica walks with you, not as myth, not as history, but as coded memory. Because Alpha is not gender. Alpha is not a mask worn by the loudest in the room, nor a posture of dominance. Alpha is alignment with the call to rise. It is the soul's answer to chaos, not with retreat, but with resolve. It is the trained instinct to respond not with panic, but with power, with calm in the storm, with action over apathy, with clarity when the world clouds over. Every time you resist decay, when you wake and choose discipline over indulgence, when you stare failure in the face and press forward anyway, every time you choose your values over comfort, when the easy way tempts, but you choose the right way instead, every time you refuse to bow to fear, when trembling hands still lift the torch, when your knees shake but you stand anyway, you are carrying her torch. You are not simply remembering her, you are embodying her defiance, her fire, her refusal to die quietly. She was one, a single voice in a storm of empire, one woman who chose not to vanish, but to roar. You are many, and each of you is an echo of that roar,